All right, so a while ago on Twitter, there was this whole conversation, about beauty, pretty privilege, stuff like that. And like people were arguing, the usual, usual Twitter stuff. And there was this one girl that made this thread that was like a point of conflict for a lot of people, right? And so she basically explained her whole experience with pretty privilege, how, she was a certain weight her whole life. At some point, due to life circumstances, she just dropped a lot of weight really quickly, and then things just changed. People were different to her on a daily basis. Like, she was like that. It was literally like she had stepped into a different world, because the world she was living in before was so different. People had a different set of attitudes towards her, and she talked about a lot of things, raised a lot of good points. Now, one of the things she did say at the end of the thread was that people who have pretty privilege are morally bankrupt, and then that's where a lot of people were upset. Why do you say that? Stuff like that. Anyway, this was also around the time that Ari Lennox, like she was trending. It was the time, this year that she was trending on Twitter, right? And a lot of it had to do with the fact that, she had changed her appearance, kind of like, she had sort of changed her wardrobe a little bit. She started wearing like long, straight wigs, stuff like that. I think she had also lost weight. And then people all of a sudden were like, wow, Ari Lennox is a fine girl. And then other people were like, oh, she has always been a fine girl. Why do you only acknowledge that she's fine now? Anyway, I'm just giving you a backstory. That was sort of the whole situation with that. And I honestly cannot believe that there were people who were actually arguing that pretty privilege is not a real thing. Obviously, it's a real thing. Beauty gives you social capital. It is currency that you can exchange for very real things in society, like a husband, like money, like respect, like access into certain social classes, like success, like the kind of partner you want. Like, it gives you favor, it gives you a lot. And so I just found it like astounding that there were people who were actually arguing that, oh no, pretty privilege is not a real thing, no, if you want to be successful, you should work hard. And I'm like, we're all living in the same society. Who are you trying to gaslight? There are so many studies that show that more attractive people get shorter and less harsh prison sentences. Think of that Prison Bay man, Jeremy Meeks, right? His beauty literally brought him a different life. That time that his like mugshots was trending, and just the way people responded to it and everything, he got a modeling contract. People were sending him so much fan mail in prison, right? Like, that's such a prime example of how, honestly, if you really deep it, beauty holds a lot of power in this society. And he's not the only one. There have been other prison bays like him. But yeah, like, it goes a long way for sure. Now, did he and the other ones have to put in a lot of work? Yes, absolutely, right? Nobody's saying that everything he has because he's beautiful. But we can't deny that it definitely opened the door for him. It brought him the attention, it brought him favor, and then he had to put in the work and walk through. There's been a lot of research in the field of social psychology regarding this whole, pretty privilege thing. There's the halo effect, which is basically when, people automatically ascribe positive characteristics to people who show positive characteristics in one area, right? So usually that's beauty, right? Because it's the first thing you see. So if a person is attractive, it's easy for us to believe and assume that they're intelligent and kind and nice, competent, this goes on. It also works in situations where you have a crush on somebody, right? Like, you easily ascribe all these positive characteristics to them, you romanticize them in your head, like they can do no wrong really in your sight. You find them attractive even if your friends don't find them attractive. Like, the halo effect works there as well. But anyway, I think this thing with Ari Lennox really just gave us a perfect example of how being conventionally attractive literally changes things for a person, right? Because it's like, Ari Lennox has always been beautiful, right? But like, now that she was more conventionally attractive, people are giving her more positive attention. Because Ari Lennox has always gotten attention, but a lot of it has not always been good. Like, people are literally explaining how their reality changed when their beauty currency went up, and so many people can relate. Like, it's not a coincidence that entire industries have been built around beauty, like fashion, makeup, plastic surgery, fitness, and advertising for all these. Like, it's not a coincidence. Now, of course, because beauty is a social construct, a person's beauty currency can change depending on a bunch of factors, their time period, their location. When we were children, people got made fun of because they had big lips, right? Now it's the thing, stuff like that. Also, in terms of location, you know, like in Nigeria, right? Like curvy girls have always like been, you know, the thing, right? Whereas in some Asian countries, thin has been the thing for a long time, like really thin. So it's obviously a very subjective thing, but the thing that is always constant is that there has always been a, you know, a beauty standard wherever you are, and a lot of times it is very, very narrow and very, very specific, and most of the population usually does not fit into that. Another thing that has been consistent is that pretty privilege is usually rooted in colorism, fatphobia, ableism, probably a few other isms as well. And when all these things come together, it has like society in a chokehold because it's very strong. And we've discussed fat phobia a little bit, right? You know, people talked about how they were not considered attractive when they were bigger, but when they lost weight and became smaller, they were suddenly widely accepted and very attractive. Now, to the point of colorism, we all know what it is, right? You know, the closer you are to whiteness, the more attractive and desirable you are considered to be, right? Like this colorism conversation is why I don't like how some people talk when the skin bleaching conversation comes up. You know, talking as if people who bleach their skin are stupid and weak-willed and don't have the strength to just like themselves. To me, it's obtuse and condescending. And it acts as if people who bleach their skin are always just doing it flippantly. Whereas sometimes they may be doing what they feel they need to do to just survive in that society. The world we're living in is very, very racist and colorist. And it runs deep on a lot of levels, right? Take Nigeria, for example. So we experienced colonialism, and one thing that was left behind was a lot of colorism. And colorism is a child of racism, and it is very, very potent, right? So much so that people have trouble getting jobs sometimes because of the color of their skin. Like I've seen these threads on Twitter where people talk about how they were applying for a job as like a TV presenter or something, and they say, you know, in the job description, they say, oh, must be light skin. And they actually do it with so much boldness, with their whole chest, like must be light skin, must have 5 years experience. And I'm like, what the hell? The color of your skin, even in Nigeria, is not at all inconsequential to what your experience will be like on a day-to-day basis, right? Because as we've discussed, being beautiful gives you currency that you can exchange for very real things in society. It could be a job, a husband, a wife, like a lot. And so, like, when people really sit down and see how it affects different aspects of their lives, you know, if you can get a better job, you can feed your family better, you can find a spouse that you want. Like, people don't insult you and bully you in school on a daily basis. I understand the pain that people experience at the hands of colorism, and I hope that changes more and more over time, so that, you know, people don't keep getting subjected to all these rubbish things. So it's not just as shallow as people being weak-willed and not having the resolve to withstand standards and like themselves. Like, if you've been bullied your whole life, I can imagine that it would be hard. Like, literally, when that whole thing was trending on Twitter, there were people who were strippers even who were talking about, like, yeah, like, honestly, like, when people come in, when the men come in, like, if you're more beautiful, you will make more money. If you're not, then you won't. That sort of thing. And so, of course, a lot of them go and do surgeries and stuff like that. And yes, that's a whole other problematic conversation. But at the end of the day, we understand where these things are coming from. Basically, my point is this is a systemic issue. It's not something that's intrinsic to them. Now, moving back to those comments that girl made on Twitter. Yes, people were upset that she said beautiful people are, like, you know, morally bankrupt, right? And I understand why they were upset. Now, I don't agree with her wording there, but I do see what she was trying to say because she explained a little bit further, right? She was basically saying that when push comes to shove, we will all partake in pretty privilege if we can, and do nothing to stop the harmful side effects that it has on the people who do not fit into, you know, that beauty standard. And that brings me to this. Why is all of this important, right? It's important because people who do not fit into the conventional standard of beauty usually get punished within their society. The same way that there are real rewards for being considered beautiful conventionally, right? There are real consequences for people who do not fit that same conventionally beautiful standard. Like the bullying you can experience in school for a thing like that. And the thing is, like, the way that, like, our people can just open their mouth and say anything, especially if they're older. They feel like it gives them a pass to do that. Your teachers can literally insult you for being fat or being this or being that. And the truth of the matter is, we're all a part of it, because other teachers don't caution them when they do that. Other students don't caution. Like, it's just, we're all a part of it on some level, if we're being honest. People treat people somehow if they don't fit into what is conventionally acceptable at the time. These punishments for not being conventionally beautiful range from small things to big things, from like microaggressions to, you know, outrightly being bullied for your appearance, to being considered the ugly friend, you know, to having people be shocked that you actually have a great personality because they never would have guessed, to getting a second, third, you know, fourth interview for a job because they like your charisma, your energy, your confidence. Beauty helps with confidence. And honestly, I understand, the people who were strongly gaslighting those that were telling their stories and their experiences with like just pretty privilege and the other side of it, right? Like, you have no incentive to unpack a system that suits you so nicely and works really well for you. I understand that, and I know that that's a big part of where it comes from, like the things they were saying. But another point that I feel is important to make is that this whole thing, this whole pretty privilege system, is not something that beautiful people are doing to everybody else. Like, we all uphold these beauty standards. Unfortunately, we're all a part of it, and so what that means is that we all have a hand in undoing it and being conscious of it, right? Because even if we did not create the problem, it is now our responsibility to fix however we can.